Stop. Before you scroll past this, I need you to understand something. The footage you've been seeing on your screen for the past 48 hours is not breaking news anymore. It is history. And most of what you've been told about it is either incomplete, dangerously oversimplified, or designed to make you feel informed without actually making you understand. So stay with me for the next 15 minutes, because by the time we're done here, you will see this situation with a clarity that most television analysts, people with full studios and graphics departments and decades of experience have failed to provide. I'm going to tell you not just what happened, but why it happened, why it was always going to happen, and what it tells us about the next 6 months in a region that is capable of pulling the entire global economy into its spiral. Let's start with the number that nobody has been able to contextualize properly. 7. 7 American military aircraft destroyed in a single coordinated strike. Now I want you to hold that number for a moment before we attach any dollar figures or geopolitical language to it. 7. The last time American air power suffered losses at that scale in a single engagement, it was a different century, a different era of warfare, and a completely different strategic environment. What happened in the last 72 hours is not a continuation of the familiar pattern of shadow conflict, proxy skirmishes, and carefully managed escalation that has defined American-Iranian relations since 1979. Something fundamental crossed the line, and the world is only beginning to process what that actually means. Here is what the reports confirm, and what the early analysis has systematically underweighted. This was not a reactive strike. It was not an emotional response to a provocation. It was not improvised. It was not desperate, and it was not a miscalculation. What Iranian forces executed was the result of years, I want to be precise here, years of intelligence gathering, war gaming, system development, and operational planning. The strike that destroyed those aircraft was the finished product of a strategic program that has been running in the background of every diplomatic headline, every sanctions announcement, every round of nuclear negotiations, and every proxy engagement since at least 2019. While the diplomatic machinery of the international community was focused on uranium enrichment percentages and JCPOA compliance windows, Iran was doing something else entirely. It was solving a different problem. It was asking a very specific question. Given American air defense architecture as it exists today, given the known coverage patterns, given the radar geometries, given the human reaction timescales inside an active defense system, what combination of vectors, timing, and payload would produce the highest probability of simultaneous catastrophic loss at a forward deployed American installation? That question has now been answered in practice, and I need to walk you through the mechanics of how it was answered, because this is the piece of the story that gets lost every time a news anchor summarizes it in 45 seconds between commercial breaks. The strike used what military analysts call a layered saturation architecture. That phrase sounds technical, but the concept is almost elegant in its brutality. You do not try to outfight a defense system. You do not try to find a single weapon capable of defeating it. Instead, you present it with a mathematics problem it cannot solve under real operational conditions. You send ballistic missiles, precision-guided, domestically manufactured, refined over years of testing on trajectories that force the defense system to commit its highest-tier interceptors. Simultaneously, you deploy drone swarms operating at varied altitudes and speeds and approach vectors. Not 1 or 2 drones, dozens, operating on timing sequences specifically designed to create impossible prioritization choices for the human operators who are sitting inside those defense stations trying to decide in real time what they can afford to let through. When you flood a defense bubble with 40 simultaneous threats arriving from different angles at different speeds, the system is not defeated by a better missile. It is defeated by arithmetic, and that is what happened here. Not a failure of technology, a deliberate engineering of an arithmetic catastrophe. The aircraft that were destroyed represent a staggering concentration of American military investment. We are talking about platforms that cost, at conservative accounting, somewhere north of $500 million in combined hardware, F-18 Super Hornets, F-16 variants in advanced configurations, and critically, and this is the detail that has been almost entirely absent from mainstream reporting, at least one dedicated intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance platform, an ISR aircraft. Let me explain why that last one matters more than the price tag. Those platforms are not simply expensive, they are the eyes of any sustained American air operation in the region. They are the systems that provide the real-time targeting data, the signals intelligence, the battle management information that allows everything else to function. Destroying an ISR platform is not like destroying a fighter jet. It is like blinding the pilot before you take away the plane. It degrades every subsequent operation, every response option, every intelligence assessment that has to be made in the hours and days that follow. And Iran knew that. The selection of that particular asset in the strike package was not random. It was deliberate targeting of American cognitive infrastructure as much as physical infrastructure. Now let's talk about cost in the dimension that military procurement briefings never capture adequately. The hardware is replaceable, expensive, time-consuming, logistically painful, but replaceable. What is not replaceable on any reasonable timeline is the human capital sitting inside those aircraft. The United States military invests somewhere between $11 and $12 million to produce a single fully qualified combat pilot from initial selection through advanced mission qualification. That number climbs sharply for specialized roles, electronic warfare officers, reconnaissance systems operators, strike pilots with significant combat experience, a decade of training, a decade of operational exposure, a decade of accumulated knowledge about how adversary systems behave under real conditions. If any of those aircraft were crewed at the moment of impact, and there are strong indications that some were, then the loss is not measured in dollars at all. It is measured in irreplaceable human expertise that takes 10 years to develop and cannot be reconstituted by any budget appropriation regardless of its size. But even that accounting misses the most strategically significant cost, the cost that operates at a level above hardware and above human capital. Forward deployed American air power is not primarily a military tool. It is a communication. It tells every government in the region, every ally calculating how much protection an American defense guarantee is actually worth, every adversary calculating how much risk they can afford to absorb. That American military response is immediate, present, and certain. The aircraft are a message. When 7 of them are destroyed simultaneously on the ground, the message is not merely interrupted, it is inverted. It transforms from a projection of certainty into evidence of vulnerability. And that transformed message is now being read in real time in every foreign ministry from Riyadh to Abu Dhabi to Amman to Ankara. Every government that has built its security architecture around the assumption of American air dominance is now running a quiet internal reassessment. If Iranian precision has reached the threshold where forward-based American assets are not automatically safe, what does that mean for our oil infrastructure, our desalination plants, our leadership compounds? These are not theoretical questions in those rooms right now. They are operational ones. And then, while the fires were still burning at the strike site, something happened that in some ways is even more consequential than the airstrike itself. Iranian ground forces, or more precisely, forces operating under direct IRGC command and control, began moving across positions that have functionally served as hard deterrence lines for years. The early reporting is deliberately vague on coordinates, and that vagueness is itself telling. When the American military stops providing precise location data in real time, it means one of 3 things. The situation is too fluid to accurately describe, the situation is too sensitive for public narrative, or the situation is too embarrassing to narrate clearly. Here, almost certainly, it is all 3 simultaneously. What we know is this: the ground movement was not opportunistic, it was pre-staged. Forces were in position before the airstrike began. This is the detail that should command the most serious analytical attention because it means the airstrike and the ground movement are not sequential events. They are synchronized components of a single operational plan. This is combined arms execution. This is the deliberate coordinated application of multiple forms of military power to achieve simultaneous effects across multiple domains at the same time. That level of operational sophistication from an adversary that has been operating under crippling economic sanctions for the better part of 2 decades, building its military capacity through domestic industry under constant international pressure, That level of sophistication is forcing a fundamental reassessment in every defense ministry that matters. Let me give you the strategic context that makes this moment intelligible, because without it, the events of the last 72 hours look like a sudden eruption. They are not. They are the culmination of a 40-year strategic project. Iran's military doctrine has a specific name for what it is building: the forward defense belt. The concept is straightforward. Rather than waiting to fight adversaries at Iran's own borders, Iran creates and sustains a layered architecture of influence, proxy forces, missile capabilities, and now demonstrated precision strike capacity that allows it to shape and contest the regional environment far from Iranian territory. Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, Shia militia networks in Iraq and Syria. These are not separate organizations with separate agendas that Iran loosely sympathizes with. They are nodes in a deliberately constructed operational network, each one serving specific functions in the forward defense architecture, each one providing Iran with the ability to impose costs on adversaries at distances and in contexts that complicate any direct response. The April 2024 direct missile strike on Israel, and I want to return to this because it has been chronically misread by Western analysis, was not an emotional retaliation for the Damascus consulate attack. Or rather, it was that, but only at the surface level. At the strategic level, it was something far more valuable to Iran. It was a live-fire calibration event, a real-world operational test of multi-domain strike architecture against a genuine peer-level adversary with some of the most sophisticated air defense systems on the planet. Iran measured that strike obsessively afterward: what penetrated, what was intercepted, at what stage interceptions occurred, what the response timelines look like from initial detection to engagement, how the defense system prioritized its targets when confronted with multiple simultaneous threat vectors. And then Iran went back and refined. The operation we are analyzing now is the product of that refinement process. You are watching version 2.0 of something that was already formidable in version 1.0. Now let me bring you to the question that is generating the most heat in Washington right now, even though it is being discussed only in classified settings and not yet in the public arena with the frankness it deserves. How did this happen without warning? The United States operates the most extensive and expensive intelligence architecture in human history: satellites, signals intelligence networks capable of intercepting communications at industrial scale, human intelligence assets embedded at various levels across the region, cyber capabilities that give access to adversary communications and planning systems. And yet, 7 American aircraft were destroyed, and an Iranian ground operation was initiated without the kind of advance warning that would have allowed those aircraft to be repositioned, those defenses to be reinforced, or any of the contingency options that exist for exactly this scenario to be executed. The ISR platforms that were among the aircraft destroyed were specifically part of the system designed to detect threats like this. How do you miss the preparation for an operation of this scale and complexity? That question is burning through every agency with a stake in the regional intelligence picture right now, and the answers, when they eventually emerge, as they always do, will reshape American intelligence priorities and spending for a generation. Let me now turn to the response question, because this is where the strategic complexity becomes genuinely painful. The United States is not facing a difficult decision. It is facing a decision set in which every available option carries serious costs, and the question is, which costs are most acceptable given the broader strategic environment? A massive military response, the kind that obliterates Iranian military infrastructure comprehensively and rapidly, carries escalation risks that American planners have spent years trying to avoid. A fully mobilized Iranian response activates the entire forward defense network. Hezbollah enters the conflict. Houthi operations against Red Sea shipping intensify. Iraqi militia networks create sustained pressure on American forces throughout the region, and Iranian ballistic missiles begin targeting Gulf infrastructure, oil facilities, desalination plants, financial centers, with consequences for global energy markets and the broader global economy that become impossible to contain within a regional frame. Oil at $180 a barrel does not stay in the Middle East. It hits every economy on the planet simultaneously. A calibrated, proportional response, the kind that signals resolve without triggering full escalation, carries its own costs that may be equally severe in the long run. It tells every adversary currently calculating their risk tolerance with respect to American power that destroying 7 American aircraft and initiating a ground operation produces a measured, manageable response. That signal travels. It travels to Pyongyang. It travels to Beijing. It travels to Moscow. It travels to every capital that has been conducting its own version of the same calculation about whether the cost of challenging American power is prohibitive or merely expensive. A response that is seen as insufficient relative to the provocation does not just affect the current crisis, it recalibrates deterrence globally, and a delayed response, the diplomatic approach, the coalition-building approach, the weeks of consultations before anything kinetic happens, creates facts on the ground that compound with time. Every day that Iranian ground forces hold positions they have taken is a day those positions become harder to reverse. Every day without a decisive American response is a day Gulf governments spend quietly accelerating their independent security conversations with China, with Russia, with each other. The diplomatic window and the military window are not independent variables. They interact, and time degrades the value of both simultaneously. What I want to leave you with, the thought I genuinely believe deserves more reflection than any of the operational details we've covered, is a question about sequence. What you have witnessed in the last 72 hours is not an endpoint. It is a demonstration, and a demonstration is always followed by an offer or a demand. Iran did not construct a 40-year strategic architecture, refine its strike capabilities through live-fire testing, stage its ground forces in advance, and execute a synchronized multi-domain operation against the most powerful military in human history, simply to make a point and then wait passively for the response. The operation was designed to achieve something territorial, something political, something that reshapes the regional balance in ways that consolidate Iranian strategic gains. That something is now in motion, and the nature of the American response in the next 72 hours will determine whether Iran consolidates those gains, whether the situation finds a new and deeply unstable equilibrium, or whether the Middle East enters a phase of conflict whose consequences extend far beyond any map of the region. The world looked different 72 hours ago. It looks different now, and it will look different again before the week is out. Stay informed, stay precise, and understand that in moments like this, the quality of your thinking about what is happening is not an academic exercise. It is a necessity.